welcome. I'm so delighted that you all could join us for this very important conversation tonight. It is offered by our wonderful African American History program at the New Jersey Historical Commission, and I am Sarah Curitan, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Historical Commission. Now, tonight's topic, monuments, memory, could not be more relevant or important. In fact, I think it's a topic that we should be talking about on a regular basis. Now, you and I may enjoy reading history books and really getting into the details of the past. In fact, right, I'm at home this evening, and right next to my bed over here is the biography of Henry V that I'm enjoying myself right now. But for a lot of folks, they don't go that deep into history. And in fact, they learn so much about history from monuments and memorials that we place in our public squares, on our street corners, in our cemeteries, and many other places. So it couldn't be more important to think about the history that those monuments share. And I think we at the Commission think it's terribly important that we think about that kind of memorialization and memory on a regular basis, and continue to reflect on what it is that we as a society choose to remember, the people and the events. So tonight's conversation is so relevant to all of that, and I'm excited now to turn it over to the director of the African American History Program at the New Jersey Historical Commission, Noelle Lorraine Williams.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. I am so happy to welcome you all to what is now would be the 99th year of commemorating this period of Black history. As many of you know, Negro History Week was initially founded in 99 years ago to commemorate the period of when Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass were both born and Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the one who founded Negro History Week. So we're excited to be here. I can't believe it's 99 years. Next year will be 100 years of really commemorating the histories of African Americans in this country. So today we're going to just start with an overview of monuments and statues here in New Jersey. So bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me a moment, please. Okay. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Okay, so today's topic, as Sarah said, Black monuments and statues in New Jersey. And I'm so happy to welcome our two guests, Fayemi Shakur and Alvin Pettit. And so I'm just really excited about this topic because I believe that public art and public monuments give us such a great opportunity to think about historical themes in a deeper way or a more innovative way. So today I'm coming from the state agency of the New Jersey Historical Commission. We're actually a state agency. We fall under the state of New Jersey, and we're dedicated to the advancement of public knowledge and preservation of New Jersey history. We were established by law in 1967, and our work is founded on this fundamental belief that an understanding of our shared heritage is essential to sustaining a cohesive and robust democracy. The commission has an educational and grant program. I'm sure some of the folks on this in the audience today are some of our grantees and folks who will watch it in the future. And we also have some legislative initiatives that we fulfill, including Revolution NJ and the Black Heritage Trail. And we support all of New Jersey's diverse individuals and communities in our work. So one of the important things in thinking about African American history here in New Jersey is that it's a long one. As one of the 13 original colonies, New Jersey's Black liberation heritage runs deep. Often when people think about African American history in New Jersey, they think of it happening majorly after the 1940s. Well, it's much bigger than that. It's a long, centuries-long history of contributions to democracy and our social and economic legacy as within the state. So from Revolutionary War soldiers to freedom seekers on the Underground Railroad and internationally renowned activists, there are the Black leaders, scholars, and civil rights crusaders that continue to shape America's democracy. African Americans in New Jersey have fought for liberation from enslavement, segregation, and disenfranchisement, and have contributed to building democracy, economics, politics, culture, and science. Though the New Jersey Historical Commission does not fund monuments and sculptures, we do fund the research, scholarship, and programming that gets the messages to the public. So public spaces are where we share our values, ideas, and understanding of history. Now, when we're thinking of this, like the beginning, public monuments in New Jersey, this is one example. It's Justice from 1827. It's a wood sculpture that they actually recently did some updating work on. and Morris County. One of the things tonight we should definitely, that should be in the forefront of our minds, is that all public art shares one's ideas about democracy, values, and history of those who create it. So there isn't a public art that's absent from a viewpoint. We shouldn't think that there's this, say public art that's Roman Greco in style, or that has some other personification. It lacks any viewpoint. All of it shares a viewpoint on what we think about democracy, what our values are in community, and our history. And interestingly, one of these early sculptures that we see here, that in front of the courthouse, is that, so while she does personify the ideas or the visual aspects of what we think of when we usually see justice, interestingly, she was created without the blindfold. So generally, justice has a blindfold to indicate that justice, is impartial. And this one was created without a blindfold. And so that gives us something to think about what the artists or the folks who commissioned the piece meant to convey. And so this conversation is mostly about representational or historical figures, right? So the figure I just showed you or shared with all of you was, it's a theme or a sentiment that's often we see in public. That's the majority of the sculptures. So New Jersey has about 700 or more sculptures, and a lot of them deal with these kind of like justice and truth, if they're not dealing with like Revolutionary War or Civil War. So one of the earliest known public monuments that's representational or historical is actually this one that's depicting John Scudder. He was an American physician and missionary. He founded the Western Medical Mission in Asia, and later became the first American medical missionary in India. So there's a portrait in the lower right of the whole monument. And here we can see the detail of what I presume to be Scudder surrounded by people in India. And so we have the opportunity to see how these sculptures or monuments convey these ideas about what it means to be American, what does it mean to be a missionary, how we depict other cultures as early as, the 1800s. So as we bring all of these themes together tonight to think of Black monuments and statues here in New Jersey, I just want to go over a couple of themes that come up in African-American commemoration and memory practices and initiatives. And so, and actually this year at the commission, or I think it's next year, one of the themes that we're working on that Sarah shared is about memory. And so it's interesting how history, memory, and our common experience, all of it just comes together. So one key thing when we're thinking about the African-American presence here in New Jersey is that we see in the 18th and 19th century that names are used to reclaim things. So for example, some of the enslavers would name their enslaved the name Hagar, which was an enslaved woman in the Old Testament. And we see a lot of African-American women who later on have the name Hannah. And one of the things that Hannah personifies is, as a teacher and has a different relationship in the Bible to God and to other people in the community. So whereas Hagar is depicted often as like a subject or, a victim to her experience, Hannah is seen more in active subject way. And so we see African-American women take on that name in the archive. Historical figures. So later on in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, as we see African Americans create local groups, they take on the names of historical figures. So one popular name is Phyllis Wheatley. So there are Phyllis Wheatley literature groups, there are Phyllis Wheatley women's groups, not only in New Jersey, but in other states as well. Phyllis Wheatley boarding houses. So here in New Jersey, one of the oldest Black women's groups was founded in 1910 in Newark, and that was the Phyllis Wheatley Literature Club, which actually became the foundation for Black women's work in doing suffrage work later on in the decade. And so we see how African Americans would utilize these historical figure names to also memorialize their experience. We see churches as institutions. And so a lot of the early African-American churches use the term African. So like the African Methodist Episcopal Church, African Methodist Zion, you'll see that often. The AME Church that was founded in Philadelphia by Pastor Richard Allen. And what's interesting is that later on, African Americans start to shed the term African because it's used during colonization movements as an indication on why African Americans really shouldn't stay in the United States. So you see the use of colored in some of the later churches, but in these early periods, as we can see with Mount Pisgah, they're using this African Methodist Episcopal Church and that legacy. And then we also later on in the 20th century see African Americans again using various kinds of names, Arabic type similar names or other names that relate to ideas of freedom as a powerful gesture of reclaiming the body. So naming is very important. The majority of sculptures and representation across the country of African Americans are generally Dr. Martin Luther King. One scholar, Derek Alderman, some of you may know his work, he and his team, they did studies over like 20 years ago looking at these different Martin Luther King representations. And one of the things you'll actually see that I didn't know growing up is that in a lot of communities, it was a very contentious renaming process to create a Martin Luther King. So you'll find Martin Luther King boulevards mostly in urban places or inner cities, and other like spaces, suburban spaces. People would often reject the renaming of the schools and the streets as Martin Luther King. And this is some data that on the Alderman site. This is an early representation of King in Jersey City. African Americans in New Jersey have also used parades. So over here on the left, we can see the Crispus Attucks Parade commemorating one of the most significant African American, Native American representations of the American Revolution, Crispus Attucks, that took place here in Newark. Also in the 19th century, African Americans engaged in parades, West India Day parades, which commemorated Emancipation Day in the Caribbean. Another way that we see commemoration in African American and other communities is through street names. That's one of the most accessible ways. So for example, we see Larry Doby over here, Negro Baseball League player. We have Adobe Street here in Newark, and then we also see Doby represented in the Hinchcliffe Stadium in Patterson. The renaming of educational institutions. Malcolm X Shabazz High School was renamed, as well as the Whitney Houston School of Creative and Performing Arts. Also, we would like to acknowledge the memorials, parks, and cemeteries. So on the left, you can see the Civil Rights Park in Atlantic City. That was created with the leadership of Dr. Clement Price, Rutgers University-Newark professor. We also see the 313 Ancestors Project in Elizabeth, and that's a monument to the ancestors. The earliest African American monument is actually not depicting an African American here in New Jersey. It's dedicated to John W. Underhill, and it's in Mays Landing. He was a notable community member. He's known as the first African American to move to Mays Landing. So they created this fountain in his memory, but it doesn't depict an African American. And so we really just don't, as of now, we're still like researching it, do not really see public sculptures on African Americans until the 1980s with the Martin Luther King sculpture at Passaic College. Some of you may recognize these: Althea Gibson, historical tennis star, and Jackie Robinson played one of his initial like forays with the in Jersey City. So that's why the Jackie Robinson piece. And then also we see an example of a community sculpture here in Newark of Eric Bowen, who was a community member in Newark. He often danced downtown, and folks all over Newark knew him. So this is an abstract representation of Mr. Eric Bowen, also known as Oogie. Again, we have some statues of African Americans that kind of border a little bit on monuments. They're alternately known as statues and monuments. So we have Paul Robeson here in New Brunswick. That was installed in 2024, and the Rosa Parks near the courthouse. And as well as folks who are not, were not present here in Newark, such as George Floyd, A. Philip Randolph, and Roberto Clemente, the Afro-Latino baseball player. And so, you know, the New Jersey Historical Commission is just very commemorated to continuing its work of supporting the research and scholarship that feeds and powers these sculptures. And so you can find more information on our website and learn more about African American history here. So thank you. So on that note, I would like to introduce Fayemi Shakur. Welcome, Fayemi.
Good evening.
So I'm going to share Fayemi's bio with you all. So Fayemi Shakur is a writer, interdisciplinary artist, arts advocate, and has served as the City of Newark's Arts and Cultural Affairs Director since January 2020. As a cultural critic and interdisciplinary artist, her writing has been featured in national and international outlets, including the New York Times, Hyperallergic, CNN Style, Vice, the International Review of African American Art, Highside Magazine, and the Mufon Women Photographers in the African Diaspora, among other books and publications. She was selected for several artist residencies in 2019 that include critical studies artist in residence at the Center for Photography at Woodstock, artist in residence at Shine Portrait Studio, and a feminist in residence at Project for Empty Space here in Newark. She has served as a leader in Newark Arts community, working in nonprofit and arts administration for over 20 years with a commitment and passion for cultural organizing, arts advocacy, community engagement, and engaging programming that explores art that challenges the way we see and experience the world, ourselves, and each other. She is, and this is not her bio, but I will say she is a multifaceted artist, community organizer, and just an empowerer of all different kinds of communities and people, women. Thank you, Fayemi, for your work, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I really appreciate your presentation too, and learned a lot that I didn't know. So thank you for starting us off that way. I'd like to begin with a snippet from a film that we commissioned for the Harriet Tubman Monument project. It's called Black Moses Rising. You can view the whole short film on PBS. I'll share a link later in the chat if anyone is interested in watching, but I'm just going to share my screen and start.
There is nothing to be gained from hiding from our history. There is nothing patriotic in looking away from our nation's original sin. It is only through facing the truth together that we can find a way forward.
We are here to celebrate the unveiling of the Harriet Tubman Monument, Shadow of a Face, which honors Harriet Tubman's life, work as a freedom fighter, and also Newark's place in that fight for freedom and liberation. It's important that we spotlight those perspectives and stories of African American and indigenous people that still remain untold. Many of the Underground Railroad stations resided in New Jersey, and at least one was here in Newark.
What we are doing today is not erasing history, but completing it. We are not demeaning other people's stories, we're telling our own. Today is our day. It's about us on the outskirts of freedom with a rock and a slingshot. Our journey in a promised land with nothing but faith in the North Star. It's about backwoods prayer meetings and songs that hid our scent from dogs on the hunt. It is our day, this moment, this monument is about us. That in our story, Moses is a Black woman, ragged, clothes with a Bible and a shotgun. She parted our Red Sea for us and marched through terror and hatred, and as herself, a real person, not fiction or some make-believe Marvel superhero. She went and got us over and over and over again.
This monument will spark appreciation for a woman who defined courage and a humble, powerful radicalism based in the fundamental ideals of love. It should inspire all of us to action. It should inspire all of us to love our country, not through what we say, but through what we do. The children of today know they stand on the shoulders of giants like Harriet Tubman.
It's the right place and time to commemorate the amazing achievement of a Black woman.
Yes, I hope you all enjoyed that. I felt like that was an appropriate, both timely introduction to sharing a little bit more about the Harriet Tubman Monument project. I'm going to share my screen again and just
My name is Nina Cook-John,
oh.
and I'm the artist who designed the Harriet Tubman
one
Monument
second.
in Newark. The duality that I really was hoping.
Sorry about that. So I want to share a slideshow with you all as I talk about the project. This is the full view, a nighttime view of the monument that we installed March 9th, 2023, almost 2 years ago. It was also close to the birth date of Harriet Tubman. And it's been recognized actually federally as Harriet Tubman Day, her birthday. And also in Newark, we've proclaimed March 9th as Harriet Tubman Day as a municipal holiday, FYI. The beginning of the monument actually started in 2020 with the removal of the Christopher Columbus statue. We didn't at the time have a plan to remove Columbus and insert Tubman, but the removal of Columbus gave us an opportunity to think about what types of representation we needed in our city, something timely for Newark, timely for our residents, that could speak to underrepresented history. Just as Noelle spoke about Dr. Martin Luther King's renaming of schools and streets and statues erected in his honor that came with controversy, it was a difficult and challenging time to remove Columbus. As in 2020, there was racial unrest all over the country as the George Floyd protests consumed us both nationally and internationally. We were thinking about representation and justice. And those monuments soon became under scrutiny, both Columbus and Confederate monuments. And so this artist on the right, architect and designer Nina Cook John, was eventually commissioned to create the Harriet Tubman Monument. Not only did we want to have a monument in Harriet Tubman's honor, we also wanted to rename Washington Park as Harriet Tubman Square to really solidify the narrative that we felt was important to share. We also commissioned historians, including Noelle Lorraine Williams, to help us tell this story. This is an image of one of the walls that you'll find installed around the monument that helps tell the story. Newark's Black community has a long history of activism for liberation. For more than 250 years, free and enslaved Blacks worked for the liberation of themselves and others, building a community of activists and standing up boldly for their civil rights. This work served as the foundation for the political activism and cultural force of today's Newark. And what we learned through the research provided by our historians is encompassed all around the monument. That was really important to us, and it was funded in part by the Mellon Foundation, who many of you know have a very prominent grant called their Monuments Project, which supports diversity and representation in monuments across the country. As you can see, in addition to the actual face of Harriet that appears on the monument, there stands a 25-foot sculpture towering over what is now Harriet Tubman Square Park. On the interior, you can learn about different things such as safe houses, churches that served as safe houses for enslaved Africans seeking liberation. We also learned through the scholars and historians' research about Black stagecoach hands who helped transport enslaved people from place to place. So a whole narrative of history that our own residents didn't know about as far as Newark's involvement in abolitionist history. And we are really grateful that we have that research to share and build upon. This here is Adebumi Gadebo, who served as an apprentice to Nina Cook John. She is an accomplished sculptor and artist herself, and she helped organize the tile making process. For about a year, we involved community members in making tiles inspired by a prompt. What does liberation mean to you? The Newark Museum of Art was a great partner in this and helping us to create these tiles. Over 500 residents took place, and they were glazed and prepared with the assistance of the Newark Museum of Art to be installed as part of the monument. This was really an important part of our community engagement process, so that when people would come to see the monument, you know, they could feel themselves be a part of it. Here we have children visiting. We've done programs in the park, one called Tubman for Tots, that our young people really seem to enjoy. This is a full view of the different tiles. When you visit up close, you'll see them. And here we have children designing, participating in the tile making workshops themselves. The face of Harriet Tubman was intentionally designed by Nina Cook John to be at eye level to allow for a deeper connection instead of a statue or a face that towers above you. And then Queen Latifah of New Jersey as well helped to narrate the story that you'll hear. We partnered with Audible on a really profound way to also engage people in the storytelling. So you'll hear her voice as you visit the monument to hear the story of Harriet Tubman's life as well. The unveiling day was just incredible celebration. And since that day, this monument has really helped to activate our public spaces. Programming is done regularly in Harriet Tubman Square, and it's become one of our most treasured monuments in the city in our goal and quest to really diversify our public art collection in the city. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Fayemi. I really appreciated that. One of the things I just think is so important that, and we can discuss this at the end of the program, is how important it is for these public monuments and sculptures to have these different collaborations. I mean, I really don't know. And looking at some of these other monuments and sculptures over the past couple of months or weeks, I noticed how there was often a private and public collaboration, sometimes like with students and other like figures in the community. And so it's really just interesting that to think of it as a collaborative, as creating kind of like our communal vision, our collective vision of how we want to memorialize and remember. So thank you so much. And we look forward to asking questions at the end of the program. So
Thank you.
I will now.
I put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to view the full film as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will introduce the sculptor and artist Alvin Pettit. One of the things I didn't get to mention at the beginning of this program was the fact that, well, you'll hear it in their bios, is that it's so powerful because both Alvin and Fayemi are both deeply respected artists and community administrators as well, in, direction and administration, as well as just deeply invested in community. So we're really lucky tonight to hear from them both. So I will read Mr. Pettit's. Alvin, am I saying your last name correctly? Oh, okay. Is it Pettit?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Yes, you are saying it correct.
Okay, so I will do your introduction now. Just a moment. So, Baltimore, Maryland native and Jersey City, New Jersey based artist Alvin Dwight Pettit has established himself in the field of fine art sculpting and painting for over 30 years. As a child, he drew inspiration from his father, a prominent civil rights attorney who also pursued art as a hobby in his early years. His father's paintings reflected the mindset of the Black Power movement of the late 1960s, which led Pettit to recognize the importance of later using his talents as a tool for social change. This mindset also attracted him to both historical and contemporary African American artists such as Jacob Lawrence, and Jacob Lawrence is a New Jersey native, and Barclay Hendricks. As a child, Pettit was also highly influenced by comic books and the artists that created them. Illustrators such as Frank Miller and Neil Adams and Frank Frazetta continue to impact his work to this day. He has seamlessly transitioned between drawing, painting, and sculpture and has never felt the need to be defined by one medium. Pettit graduated from the Baltimore School for the Arts in 1988 to attend the School of Visual Arts. There, he had the opportunity to study under legendary comic book artist Will Eisner and earned his BFA in 1992. His professional career began in 1994 after being hired as an assistant sculptor to world-renowned artist Jeff Koons. During that time, Pettit was entrusted with sculpting one of the artist's most famous pieces titled Balloon Dog. In 1996, he furthered his artistic training at the historic New York Students League. He is a prolific artist, and he's worked for clients, and a prolific artist and product designer, producing work for clients such as Telco Creations, the Conan O'Brien Show, the Guggenheim Museum, Saks Fifth Avenue. And so in 2013, Mayor Fulop of Jersey City appointed Pettit as the director of the Mary McLeod Bethune Life Center, which is the city's largest municipally owned and operated facility of its kind. Since then, Pettit has spearheaded its transformation into one of the most revered cultural epicenters in the area. Here, underserved minority communities, as well as residents abroad, have access to free arts wellness and higher educational programming, as well as large-scale events. The center is utilized for large-scale events. I have hosted a family event actually at the center. Currently, Pettit donates time to serving on the board of the Jersey City Arts Council, as well as other boards, including the Jersey City Public Art Advisory Board. In addition, he often participates in the city's mural arts program, where he mentors youth in creating large-scale works, as well as understanding the business of art. A few of Pettit's most recently noteworthy achievements include the creation of Jersey City's 11-foot Mary McLeod Bethune Monument, which I showed you all in the first slide, and recently being selected by the city of Philadelphia to create the official Harriet Tubman Monument for its City Hall, scheduled to be unveiled in 2026. Another momentous project that Pettit is working on is an 8-foot sculpture of the iconic LGBTQ activist Marsha P. Johnson for Hoboken, New Jersey, also scheduled to be unveiled in 2026. So impressive. Thank you. And I would like to welcome you, Mr. Pettit. Thanks.
Can you see your slides?
I can, yes.
All right, it's whenever you're ready, please feel free.
Okay, so where would you like me to start? Just basically just describing, I'm gonna start with this project here, I guess, right? Okay, so yeah, this is Marsha P. Johnson for Hoboken, which is currently in the process of, well, where I am on the project right now, reason why I only have sketches to show, because right now I'm just in the process of working on the maquette model, which is going to be like a 2-foot small figure that I'll present to the city, just so they can get a visual 3D of it, and then we go into the actual size, which will be an 8-foot high monument on top of maybe a 2.5-foot pedestal. So altogether about 10.5 to 11 feet high altogether. You know, I was really excited to get this project, and to me, it's almost even more, I guess, in the current climate of what we're dealing with now throughout the country. This project is even more sweeter to do, because when you talk about representation being denied, or DEI and whatever is considered different or, you know, diverse, that is currently being ostracized and attacked. I'm really happy to be able to do a project like this, because we're dealing with somebody who was obviously an LGBT activist before those letters even existed. And we're going back to the 70s and 80s and 90s when Marsha was active. And I would like to also say too, when you start talking about it related to Black History Month, to me, it's even also important in that aspect too, because when you look at civil rights activism and you look at the leaders that we put in the forefront, whether it be Malcolm X or Dr. Martin Luther King, or Medgar Evers, whoever it might be, Rosa Parks, this is an aspect that's left out. And, you know, I can't necessarily say that it's not left out on purpose, because you still have a lot of people in the African American community that aren't necessarily always comfortable talking about or addressing LGBT issues, because it may go against certain traditional Christian beliefs or something like that. So when I was presented with this project, I was like, okay, well, I didn't know a whole lot about this particular individual. But when I did the research on him and watched different documentaries on Netflix that I saw on YouTube, I'm like, wow. So you have here an African American who was even leading in movements that I didn't even know African Americans led in back in the late 60s and early 70s. He was heavily involved in Marshall was heavily involved in the Stonewall uprising. Some even rumored that he might have started it, from what I read. So I was like, wow, you know, Black folks have led on all fronts, whether it be marching in Birmingham or leading LGBT and gay rights activism in New York. And that's something that I was very pleasantly surprised to find out. So that's why, you know, I like doing monuments that kind of, I'm not going to say make people uncomfortable deliberately, but, you know, at least make you think and make you challenge, you know, the status quo of how we perceive things and how we perceive certain individuals. So, yeah, on this one, now this is one that's currently in the works as well. I'm only in the concept stage right now. This is going to be a monument that's going somewhere down on the waterfront, the Jersey City area. I don't necessarily, they haven't, the organization that's sponsoring it has not yet chosen a location, but I titled this piece Jersey Love. And the concept behind this was showing two hands. There's going to be one a male hand, one a female hand, and they're embracing these. And you know what? I totally forgot the name of this flower. This is my concept, and I can't remember it. But it's this kind of like a wild weed that grows all over North Jersey. You see it all over Secaucus. You see it all over Liberty State Park. You see it all in the marshland areas of northern New Jersey. And it's on the tip of my tongue what it is. And I did a whole presentation on it, so I should know this. But I did some research on this plant. And apparently this plant was what was considered, became into this region. I guess it was imported from some of the docks on the waterfronts back when shipping was going on from overseas, and it was brought here as an invasive species, and it just started growing everywhere and taking over. And so, you know, I thought it was kind of interesting because it's showing it's part of our natural environment right now, and it was it's almost like an immigrant in itself in certain ways. And you know, it's kind of, when we look at the community here in the North Jersey area and a lot of New Jersey, New York, it's made up of immigrants, and this plant and this species came on, and now it's part of our, it came on as kind of a immigrant in certain ways in this vegetation. Now it's part of our natural habitat and part of our everyday life that we see. So I thought I wanted to highlight this in this particular piece and just show two whole hands holding it. And it could be something romantic. It can be also be interpreted as something just togetherness or unity or whatever it might be. But I thought this vegetation very much represented the Northern Jersey area. So I wanted to make something of it. And this is still, like I said, as soon as they pick a location, I'll get a height on it, but the approximate height is going to be somewhere roughly probably about 12 feet high altogether. So this is Harriet Tubman that I will be doing for the city of Philadelphia, that's why I was rushing back now. I actually was in Philadelphia, not for this project, but actually another one that just came up of sculpting of civil rights activist Sadie Alexander. And this is a project I just recently received. Now I'm actually in the final 5 on this project, so I don't have it yet, but you know, I'm down to the final 5. So we went to look at the site over where Sadie would stand, the monument of Sadie would stand right in downtown Philadelphia. But here to the Harriet Tubman, this is actually going to stand right in front of City Hall. And what you're seeing here is a computer rendering in the middle of how to be placed, where to stand. Approximate size is going to be around 14.5 feet on top of the pedestal. And it's basically, you know, this one I'm actually starting, I started already. So it's in a rough stage, and the initial carving and the concept behind this, I actually wanted to show Harriet Tubman in a way that we often don't see her. And I wanted to show, basically showing her as a military leader. I mean, we always see her as a slave. We always see her on the run. We see her freeing captives and taking slaves to refuge. And, you know, we're very familiar with that depiction of her. But my thinking was we often don't see another side to her, which was also a soldier, a warrior. She actually led a battalion of 115 Black troops into raid of a plantation, and basically took on Confederate soldiers. So I actually I didn't want to show her in a defensive position, which we always see her in, on the run or kind of running from oppression. I wanted to show a time where oppression and tyranny was on the run from her. And this was like a perfect example of her holding the rifle, fully armed, locked and loaded, and ready for battle. And I put her in it's kind of a prayer position, but if you can look in the closest on the hands, it can be interpreted as a prayer position, or she's actually clenching a fist, which is different from a traditional a prayer stance where you have the fingers locked. She's actually doing this. So that can be interpreted as, okay, she's calling on her faith, or it could be on a call for battle. And I deliberately did that so that the viewer can kind of, or it could be both, and the viewer could kind of see what they wanted to see in that. But this is a piece that I wanted to specifically show her in an offensive position, not a defensive one. And if you looked at in the details of the pile of rubble she's standing on, there's a lot of chains and shackles. There's going to be the mount that she's standing on. And then she's actually, her back foot is actually standing on ruins of the Confederate flag. So that's the concept behind this piece. And I have her kind of blowing in the wind. This is kind of where my, I guess my superhero background comes in, because I like to almost show like a very action sort of element to a lot of my sculptures, for that superhero sort of drama to it. So this was one that I did as a concept piece for actually Philadelphia as well, at the Philadelphia Academy of Music, of Marian Anderson. And this one, I did not get the final piece. I was not selected, but this was my proposal, and this was originally proposed, like I said, to stand in front of the Academy in Philly. And this was Mary Anderson, a famous opera singer. And I just wanted to kind of capture her in the middle of just, you know, that intense wail that she had. Is just, you know, the power of her vocals. And I wanted to just capture the power of her vocals in one position of just showing her in that stance and that intensity of her facial expression, and where you could just almost kind of picture the words coming out of her mouth. And I kind of combined it with some kind of a pose that she was famous for showing at, where she did her hands, shown at the Lincoln Memorial when she sang there famously. And also kind of took a dress from her younger appearance. So I like to, when I do my sculptures, I like to kind of combine different references. I don't like to just take from one photo and just copy it. I like to kind of create a unique reality that tells a story of the subject that you can't just get from any one particular picture or any one particular photo. This is the Mary McLeod Bethune Center. Mary McLeod Bethune Monument, which stands out at the center where I'm the director of. This stands in front of Mary McLeod Bethune Park, which was opened back in 2021. And actually was fortunate enough to be able to play a role in designing this park. And I worked with the city engineers in laying out doing the layout of the park and the initial sketches and picking out the amenities of the park. So I did the rough designs that were then turned over to the engineers that were then rendered based on the designs that I did. As well, then I obviously did the sculpture as well. And I actually wanted to show, I did some reference and did some looking around for different Mary McLeod Bethune monuments. And, you know, I thought it was interesting. Everyone I saw of her, I always saw her depicted as an elderly woman. And I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to kind of capture her in her early years. And I just wanted to capture a kind of an intense look on her face as a young woman when she's just starting her career and the birth of her activism, when she's starting her school for young girls and just educating herself. So that's why I have her embracing books as a metaphor for the knowledge she's embraced of just learning and academics. And then I wanted to capture an expression on her face, because for me, a lot of monuments we see, they tend to have these expressionless, void of any humanity stare on their face. And I always kind of think one of the strongest aspect of capturing something, especially depicting a subject in sculpture, is the face. That's what we look at a lot. So I really like to capture an expression. It's not always easy to do because it can go wrong if you don't do it right. But you know, I want that intensity. I wanted that look on her, intense ambition and like focus that she would have had to have had. And you know, like I said, I couldn't just take this from any one picture because it didn't exist like this. So I had to take some pictures of her when she was younger, and then almost put together a forensic of using a couple models that may have fit her kind of build, ethnicity, age, and everything, and kind of put everything together to kind of recreate this young version of Mary McLeod Bethune, because obviously there's only a few pictures that exist of her in her younger years. And you know, I really wanted to capture that stage of her life. And you're seeing some pictures here of when we had the opening, and one is here actually is the clay sculpting of it at the bottom when I was sculpting, you know, in the studio, and then the finished piece, which stands in the park right now in the bronze. This was the Black Lives Matter mural. This was done back in 2020, right after the George Floyd murders. And city council woman, Jersey City had, Joyce Waterman had asked me to create the official Black Lives Matter for Jersey City. And this was right after all that was going on, like I said, with the George Floyd situation. and every city was putting up one, so Jersey City went one. So I actually led a team of 6 assistants that helped me pull this off. Now the design I came up with here was actually a design I took from an old historic Black Panther newspaper. And the way the heading of the Black Panther newspaper from the late 60s, they had like a star on each corner. Sometimes would have like, well, not each, it had a star on one corner. Then it would have like Huey P. Newton in the star. So I actually used just that layout of the Black Panther papers. And I actually put I put the fist over the L, the Black Power fist. And on one end of the Black Lives Matter, I have Angela Davis in one star, and then Colin Kaepernick in the other. And for me, it almost played off the symbol of the Afro, and how the Afro for the last, from 50 years from Angela Davis on to 50 years in the future with Colin Kaepernick, how the Afro represents almost became like a symbol of rebellion, and how it became a symbol of liberation for Black folks, and how the hairstyle kind of embodied the revolution from one generation to another. And that's how I wanted to tell a story with my Black Lives Matter mural. And we knocked it out in 2 weeks, and then all the cars ran over it again when they opened up the street, and it got washed away with about a month or so, but it was very interesting to do. Okay, so this was a piece that I had done for, this is called I'm Your Protector, a private organization that commissioned this. This is a traveling exhibition about regular people in our daily lives that have done extraordinary things. I partnered with another sculptor friend of mine on this, named Joe Reginella out of Staten Island, and we did this together, but I did all the heads for this particular piece. And I'll just focus on one. If you the upper right-hand corner, this was a gentleman who actually had rescued back in 2007. He was in the subway, and he actually had rescued somebody who fell in the subway going into a seizure, had epilepsy or something. So Wesley, the guy I'm depicting here with the hat, he actually jumped on the railroad track and threw his body over the guy who was having a seizure so the train could run over both of them. And this was like back in 2007. They both lived and everything thanks to Wesley. And he became like a national hero. He was even invited to the president's State of the Union, State of the Nation when George W. Bush was in office. So he lives in Harlem, and he actually had posed and modeled for me for this particular piece. We met in Harlem where he actually posed some life and stuff. I took some measurements and headshots and all that. So that's what this piece was about. And I don't really know what the organization has done with them now. I don't know where they're traveling. I kind of lost track of where they are right now, but that's what was going on with this whole exhibition. This one, and what you're seeing here is a scene out of Union Square. This was just, some of these don't have much to do with kind of what we're talking about tonight. This was just for a private client that wanted to do a scene of Ganesh for a wedding and whatnot. We can move on from this one. So this one actually, this is one I did back in 2013 for commissioned by Dunkin' Donuts. I do murals and stuff too, as you know, as well. And I wanted to show 4 Jersey girls of different ethnicities, all kind of sharing a cup of coffee together. And this was a Dunkin' Donuts on Martin Luther King Boulevard in Jersey City. This was for a theme park, Lady Gaga, back in 2013. And this is a theme park in New Hampshire. I did a series of different things for their Hall of Fame concert. This was for a company by the name of the Mendes, located in Union City, which we were doing a series for Canobie Lake Park in New Hampshire, as I said already. So this one's about 14, 13%. This is all part of the same series. It was for a concert with Louis Armstrong. What we got next? Michael Jackson. And I believe all these is probably still standing there. These go back to 2010 and whatnot. I haven't been there to see them, but most of them, I believe, are still there. Now, these were done in foam. So when you're dealing with foam, you're not dealing with the bronzing process. So they're basically sculpted, then they're hard coated with sprayed with a resin. And then that's how they are presented. Now, these aren't made for long-term. Bronze will be standing there for 100 years or so. These will be they're good. If they're outside, they're probably good for about 5 or 6 years. Inside, they can last for a long time, but it's a much quicker process, a less expensive process, depending on what the client wants to spend. But yeah, that's just working with, these are more like, I'd say, commercial art. I've done a lot of this stuff in the past. I used to do things from Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I've done a lot of things from Museum of Natural History. So different type of art from back when I was doing this sort of work. Is that all of them? I think that, yeah, there we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those were powerful images. So I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Fayemi back to, I want to say the stage, but I just don't know if there's a stage on Zoom.
You're so
So
talented, Alvin. I love those, all of those
Thank
sculptures.
you.
Really incredible work.
Thank you so much.
yes, so we're going to take, people can put questions, I guess, in the Q&A. And Rachel, if you're still up to it, if you could share the questions, but I will start off with a question of my own. One of the things that I'm really committed to in my role at the commission and just generally is really bringing out these stories of New Jersey's Black liberation heritage and showing the ways that we have been agents in creating this democracy and in this world. And even though Harriet Tubman is not from New Jersey, we know that she spent time in Cape May. I believe she was like thrown off of a train in Newark. She spent time in New Jersey. One of the things that's so powerful is that Harriet Tubman represents the various communities, African Americans making their way in New Jersey, fighting against slavery and fighting for their civil rights. So I think it's so powerful that both of you in your projects, so for example, with Fayemi and the Harriet Tubman Monument, deciding to have, with Nina Cook-John, to have the histories embedded in the sculpture. And then for Alvin for the statue in Philadelphia, to choose that moment of the raid in Harriet Tubman to depict her in another scene or historical moment that many people don't know about. And so one of the questions I have for both of you is that your commitment to representing these stories of resilience, autonomy, and being subjects of African American figures, is that something you developed later on in your career, recently with these projects, or was that your initial commitment with arts, culture, and community practice when you started decades ago?
Well, my last name is Shakur. And so I changed my last name in college as I was studying and learning about the Black Power movement, the Black Arts movement, and of course, the Black Panthers. I had read Live from Death Row by Mumia Abu-Jamal and learned about the MOVE organization and John Africa. And as a child, I remember I was maybe about 9 years old watching the news when I saw the Osage Avenue bombs by their mayor. And I remember asking my mother, what about the children? I knew that there were children inside of those buildings and those homes. And I think I've always had an interest in stories around Black liberation and the different ways that it can manifest. And I wasn't born in Newark, but after college, I wanted to move here because of the legacy of the city, because of the work of the Baraka family. My great-grandmother actually had a home around the corner from the Baraka family. My great-grandmother lived on South 11th Avenue, and I was just called to be here in the city to make a contribution. So I do think that in my work, Black liberation and the history of it is a constant that I continue to be a student of and to explore. And I think it's really important that our children know that history. And when we started the Tubman Monument, we recognized something was happening with the book banning and the critiques about critical race theory, the fear of teaching slavery to children in schools. And we felt like it was a really important moment to elevate Harriet Tubman's legacy and tell her story as an American hero, not just a Black American hero.
Thank you, Fayemi. Alva, did you have any comments regarding the question?
Yeah, I think with me, I kind of, in some ways, like I was saying during my presentation, I kind of grew up with it, grew up in it, just from hearing stories of family who grandfather was heavily involved in the civil rights movement with desegregating some schools in Maryland, in Harford County area of Maryland, back in the 50s. A father who's always been and still is involved in a lot of civil rights activism within law and in politics. And so it's just kind of just something that I grew up almost thinking it was normal in some way. You know, when you just see it in your household every day, you just feel like, okay, you're supposed to be involved. You're supposed to, I guess, do whatever you can to make a change in your own way. You know, I became an artist, so that's always been something that was in me. Then I think it triggered more, I think, when I left Baltimore and moved up here to go to New York and go to college up here at School of Visual Arts, because I had a, like, coming from Baltimore, you know, there was like a Black art scene that, you know, I didn't, in the Baltimore in DC area, that I didn't see up here. It's like when I was coming up here in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of like every gallery I walked in back then, or, you know, even the school itself, School of Visual Arts, a lot of times it was only a few of us Black kids in the whole school. And then the museum scene, it was like, you just weren't represented anywhere. New York art scene area. Even a lot of places where I worked, whether it be Museum of Natural History or, you know, I used to sculpt at the Macy's Parade and all these different places where I was working as a staff sculptor back in the 90s. A lot of times I was the only Black person there in some ways. You know, so it was just kind of like, I can't say I'm not saying it's by design or lack of information. I don't know. I just know that we just weren't represented in any of these institutions and any of these galleries, any of the arts. And it's different now, but, you know, that's not my time coming. You know, I didn't see that. And then, you know, what was also important to me is just how, when I do these monuments, how I'm representing. I like to do things in a way that's kind of unapologetic. And I also like to do them in a way that present what the subject I'm taking on in a way that's educational, but almost makes you kind of stop and ask a question, stare or what's going on. Because sometimes monuments can get lost in the environment, like trees, or I just call them, some of them become pigeon rests, where, you know, you sit in the park, you no longer care, some general or some philanthropist has got a monument there. They be like picnic tables, nobody cares who it is, or nobody, you know, they become scenery and it gets lost in the background. So I try to create pieces that kind of make you want to stop and stare and care about the monument, kind of what you all were talking about in the beginning. You know, what makes people care? What brings you back in? What makes you interested in this? And it's got to be more than just building a statue. It has to be something that the statue is calling out to you or saying to you. Like one thing very important with the Harriet Tubman, why I deliberately, when I got that project, I was so excited, because I didn't want to show her in a defensive position. Not that that wasn't part of her history, but I wanted to show her in ways monuments that we don't see Black folks. Because even when you see them, when we get movies, film, or whatever, it always had to be in a way that made white folks feel comfortable, or maybe in some ways. And I never, like, how often, look how long it took them to make a movie of Nat Turner, and even that was an independent film. Now, so my thing is, I never forget, I was 15 years old, and my father, he said to me, this was back in 1985, and he said, in the show, the series Shaka Zulu was coming on. That was airing for the first time. I don't know if you all ever saw that. And he goes, your son, you're gonna watch this. I said, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch it. I don't know anything about Africa. I don't watch that. I don't care. You watching it, that's your assignment. He goes, you need to watch it because you don't always need to see Black folks being shown as slaves and just growing up watching Roots and Driving Miss Daisy and all that nonsense. You're gonna watch this, so you see Black folks when they were actually in control or in a position of power. And so I'm pouting like the first episode, and like, I don't want to watch it. And by the end of the first episode, I'm hooked. You couldn't even pull me away from the next 3 series or the next 2 episodes or whatever. I love the series or whatnot. But growing up at that time, it was very surreal to me, because every time we saw something that depicted Black people, African Americans, it was, even if it was overcoming oppression, you were still in a position of oppression, and you were still kind of always portrayed as the victim that might have gotten out or overcame, but never the person in control, never the one of a position of power. And, I think that kind of always sat with me. That's why when I did Tubman, I didn't want to show her, I wanted to show her as a warrior. And I wanted to show her in full battle gear, sword, rifle, and everything. And I even got some pushback, with a lot of people that were complaining about showing her with the rifle. Because of all, they're saying, okay, well, you got a lot of violence and shootings in Philadelphia. We don't want something that kind of projects that, or something, or something that or represents violence, like guns. And my thing, well, my answer to that was, this history, when you look at it like American history, we idolize who built the West, who tamed the West, all the cowboys, John Wayne and Roy Rogers and all the great Western heroes, Clint Eastwood. So when the guns were in the hands of the white cowboys, it's seen as something heroic and something of this nostalgia. But that nostalgia is not always projected when, the Black Panthers were holding guns fighting for the Second Amendment. So to see a Black female with the rifle, I'm like, well, she fought for freedom, just like, the people we're told to idolize, so-called, quote unquote, tame the West. And I say that quote unquote because obviously people are getting killed, but they're seen as heroes, is my point.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, and I think that's definitely something in both of your work. Today, Fayemi has had she's helped to administer the mural project here in Newark, and she's also worked with a collective, the Womb of Violet, Fayemi. And they helped, and they worked with an artist, a muralist here, to create one of the largest expressions of community artist, activist Gladys Grower and Bria Knight, a poet here. And so it's so amazing because we have the opportunity to, again, share the histories of their lives, but also share these artists who believed in sharing the histories and community lives. But what I wanted to just quickly say is that with both of your work, the Tubman, just seeing the Tubman here monument here in Newark as it looms with light as you walk down the street, seeing your prospectus, Alvin, for the piece in Philadelphia, but also just seeing the Mary McLeod Bethune piece up close, the detail and the dress, her movement, and seeing someone who looks like my aunts on the streets of Jersey City, where my family is from. That whole massiveness that you two have both been able to accomplish in this work is really powerful for the public. So I just wanted to So Rachel, I guess I'll start off some of these Q&A questions because I know we're closing at 8. So Alvin, I'll give you 2 questions at one time. So one person wants to know, are you naming the statue in Philadelphia General Harriet Tubman? And then the second question is, thank you for your incredible work. How was the Marsha P. Johnson Monument selected for Hoboken? It's exciting to see her legacy honored there. So you heard both of those questions, right?
I didn't hear the first one too clear. What's the first one?
So the first question is like in line with what you've been sharing today. Are you naming the sculpture in Philadelphia General Harriet Tubman?
Yes, yes. I actually changed that recently because she was recently given the honorary position of general. So the title will go general before the name. So that is going to be there's going to be a change in that. And then the second one, well, the subject of matter as far as Marsha P. Johnson, the city officials, I guess, in kind of partnership with the local LGBTQ local organizations kind of came to me with that project of what they wanted to see down there. And then I just came up with the design of how I wanted to show Marsha, how I wanted to present Marsha with the kind of the pose. I want something related to Stonewall in there as well, because even though it's a Hoboken story, it's also a New York story, because Marsha lived in Hoboken the last 12 years of her life. And, it's also, so I want to kind of embody that all together. But the city actually presented me with that was as far as the subject matter, what they wanted there.
Great. And I see, and so I see the comments. Folks are, for you and Fayemi, just commending your work, the amazing work that you both are doing. Ruby Cooper commented, I salute your dedication and commitment to African American heritage, to Fayemi, and the movement to prevent it from being forgotten. And also some other comments on how much they love Alvin's work and for sharing the process behind it. One of the things I wanted to say, and Rachel, please let me know if there are any other questions I overlooked, is that with this recording of the program tonight, I will share the links to the longer video pieces to Fayemi's for the monument here in Newark. There's some great, as you all had a snippet of some of the commentary from the various folks who worked on the project. There's also a link to explore the sculpture. One of the great things is there's also a website that's attached to the Harriet Tubman Monument that has teachers' resources connected to it, as well as the information with their websites. One of the things I wanted to ask before we close, so what, as far as engaging the public in these historical themes and meditations on Black liberation, what are some of the ways that you all would suggest as far as engaging youth and the students and public in kind of using the sculptures as kind of an opportunity to create conversations with you around history? So what are some suggestions or some musings or anything you would like to share? Rachel, was there a question I missed?
I think the only one that's still there is from Mr. Pettit, if any of your sculptures have been shown at Grounds for Sculpture.
Grounds for Sculpture, no, I haven't shown anything in that particular venue.
Sounds like maybe not yet.
So,
I guess about engaging communities is for folks who are thinking about projects like this, is to think about how you want to engage community from the beginning, beyond just them visiting, but the narrative that you want to tell, but how to make people feel like they are a part of the process, just part of the inspiration for the tile making workshops. But then we also set up these listening booths with prompts asking people, what does liberation mean to you? And can you share a personal story of perseverance and liberation in your own life? And 50 of those stories are incorporated into the sound of the monument when you go and visit. And so I would definitely encourage, educators to use curriculum that was developed by the Newark Museum of Art and, bring their students out on tours to have discussion. There are benches, when the artist, designer Nina Cook John envisioned the monument, she envisioned it as a meditative space and a gathering space. And I know for myself, Harriet Tubman is definitely like one of the first Black heroes you learn about in elementary school, but even in my adult life, she serves as inspiration on how to get through difficult times. Like if Harriet could do all that she did, what can't we do? And so to have that space of reflection and gathering in Newark, I hope that people of all ages will come and sit. We have photos of kids doing their homework, sitting, on the benches around the monument. And that's just, makes me happy to see.
Mr. Pettit, do you have any musings or other things you would like to share as far as like youth or community engagement with
Yeah,
the monument?
Well, right now I'm actually corresponding with the city of Philadelphia. They're going to be making some studio visits up here with some students from art schools there in Philadelphia to actually come to my studio where I'll do demonstrations of the process. They can see the Harriet Tubman Monument and whatever else is going on here, witness it firsthand. And then also the work that I do at the Mary McLeod Bethune Life Center. I mean, for me, the Bethune Center, since I've been director there for the last 12 years, that too has also been, for me, one giant sort of creative project. And what's so satisfying about it is I get to bring it to a community where none of this stuff existed before in the Greenville section of Jersey City. We didn't have art galleries, we didn't have dance studios and all that. So it's been like a mission to try to bring all that to that community, because I want, one thing that's always been a pet peeve with me is that art should not be synonymous with gentrification. And most of the times where we see an so-called art movement forming, it's always where gentrification is happening and we don't see any people that look like us there or often involved in it over historically. So that's one of my missions at the Bethune Center. And then when I'm even doing seminars there, doing things at the center or working with the students, or even bringing in students to assist me with my sculptors here, one thing I also try to emphasize on is the business of art. I mean, I don't want to just say, okay, it's just enough that you want to enjoy doing art, so just follow your passion. What are the steps of making that happen? And what are the tangible roads that you can follow? Because, I mean, I went to some of the best art schools between the Baltimore School for the Arts in high school and went to the School of Visual Arts and the Art Students League. And couldn't have had a better art education, but for all that I had very little focus on the business. When I got out, I had to teach myself. And with all the art schools I've been through, I shouldn't have had to teach myself that. So it's kind of like, and that's why a lot of us tend to fall off or don't stay with it or see it as, this whole, I guess, the stigma of the starving artist. And then often sometimes discouraged by parents not to do it because it's not seen as a viable career. So that's why I try to, whatever I've learned, I try to pass that on. Like, here's actually how you make it happen.
Yes. And, one of the things that's so important is that with the Black Power movement, with the Black abolitionist movement, is this unification of preserving our history, creating economic opportunities for our communities. And those things are often built together. for African American communities here in New Jersey, which makes people think, oh, well, that's not just art, that's also history, that's also economics, but it's because we see the holistic opportunity for empowerment. And so I just think that's so important. So on the behalf of the New Jersey Historical Commission, I would like to say thank you to you both. And thank you to the audience for coming out tonight, and all the folks who signed up who will watch it in the future, for engaging in these ideas around the ways our diverse populations in New Jersey, as one of the most diverse states here in the United States, represent our communities and the folks who help to lead our local and national communities in important ways. And feel free to visit our website, www.history.newjersey.gov, to see more of our programs, learn about our grants program. We have a deadline coming up on March 14th. We also have a deadline for the New Jersey Black Heritage Trail. So if you would like to nominate a site, you need to send a letter of inquiry. But we are here pushing New Jersey stories. So thank you to you all. Have a good evening. I look forward to working with you all in the future. Okay, thank you.